Increasingly, citizens' groups are taking control of municipal functions, some even with the support of courts, and are delivering services where this sphere is collapsing. That's the view from Professor David Everatt from the South African Statistics Council. The trend, he says, is being driven by voters, angry voters, who are simply sick and tired of corrupt politicians. Professor Everatt joins me now on Monday lunchtime. Professor, good afternoon to you. Why is this happening, and at what speed?
Let me first just say I'm not talking as chair of that council. This is me as an academic speaking. Why is it happening? I think across the, well, not across the board, but in a great many towns and villages and cities, what people are finding is that services are not simply not being delivered, but are actually declining. The infrastructure is declining, maintenance, repair, and so on is getting slower and slower. And yet we're all still loyally paying our rates and taxes. And at some point, something had to give. And in the last, I would say, probably the last 6 months, we're seeing more and more community groups either taking action themselves, in other words, just doing it because they are, it's what I call the hutfall factor in the article, but they've just had enough and they just want to do it. In others, they have asked the courts to intervene, and the courts have actually transferred powers from local government to citizens groups to do this, as well as budget, I mean, so they can carry it out. That's up in Swartruffins and Costa. In other places, people are talking about withholding their rates and their taxes, because what they're in effect seeing is it's kind of Einstein's definition of madness, which is we keep electing people, we keep paying our rates and taxes, and in return we're getting the same, which is nothing or very, very, very little. So I think people are hurtful.
And you make the point, as you've just mentioned, that it's quite astonishing that on at least one occasion, the courts have said, yeah, we understand your pain. You have our permission to proceed.
Yes. I mean, I think the courts are, it's unfortunate that the courts are being so drawn into every single aspect of our lives now that even to get water to come out of our tap, we have to take government to courts in order for that to happen. But the courts have proved to be very amenable to this message, because in many cases the message is a very basic one. Sewerage, water, refuse. It's those kinds of very basic functions. And they have been very supportive of communities that have waited 27 years for these services to be delivered. In many cases, certainly in the case that was where the court really did intervene in Swartruffins, the point was also made that appointments were completely inappropriate. The local authority had no skills to do this job. And it's important to note that it's a non-racial group of citizens that stepped up to do the job. It's not one race doing it or one other race or one group doing it and not for others. They stepped up and they fixed the sewerage for the entire area.
And you make the point that it's against this backdrop, this background, that the country has local government elections scheduled, I think, for August this year, if I remember correctly. Effectively, there is now a lack of trust or a breakdown in trust. That is going to have an interesting dynamic when it comes to the election itself, isn't it?
Isn't it? I mean, I think it's, the trust deficit has been growing exponentially for all parties, I would add, not just certainly the ANC is getting it in the neck, but other parties are as well, particularly where there are coalitions in the metros and so on. And I think, for politicians to approach us again, so you'll remember 2016, the big shock that the ANC could lose Tshwane and Tshwane and Johannesburg and elsewhere. Now, I think for any politician to go back and say, please trust us again, and we promise this time we'll get it right, that's a really hard sell. And it would be fascinating to know what kind of messaging the political parties are going to do to persuade us to register and to vote, let alone to vote for them. That for me is the danger of this, is that we are also hurtful, that we opt out of the political process. And I don't think you fix a political process by avoiding it. You fix it by getting stuck into it. And I'm hoping that these citizens groups at some point become candidates. so that we can vote for people who want to fix the sewerage or make the taps work and so on.
Yeah, and that messaging that you refer to is going to ramp up very, very shortly. Professor David Everatt, thank you very much indeed.